Hello, Virgo. Thank you for being here. Okay, something is different in the quality of the air around your life right now. Not louder, not more dramatic, different in the way that mornings are different after a long night, not because the world has changed, but because something inside the person moving through it has shifted quietly and completely into a new orientation. A new way of holding themselves in relation to what they want, a new willingness, fragile, tender, not yet fully named, to believe that what they want is actually genuinely on its way to them. Stay here. Let this reach you slowly. Well, there is a specific kind of love that doesn't announce itself, doesn't arrive with the electric, destabilizing intensity of something that burns bright and fast and leaves a specific kind of ash behind. It arrives instead like the first warmth of a season, changing so gradual, so unhurried, so gentle in its accumulation that you almost miss it, until one ordinary moment, in the middle of something entirely unremarkable, you look up and realize the cold is gone. Not dramatically, not with ceremony, simply, completely, undeniably gone. And the warmth that replaced it has been present apparently for longer than you noticed, long enough to have already changed the temperature of everything around you without ever once demanding that you acknowledge it was doing so. That warmth may already be present in your life, in ways you're noticing, and in ways you haven't yet allowed yourself to fully name. Let me tell you something about the love you actually wanted, not the version you settled into over time, not the version you rationalized into acceptability because the alternative was another kind of aloneness you weren't sure you could sustain. The original version, the one that existed before the disappointments arrived and began, slowly and methodically, to edit your expectations downward into something more survivable. That version was not naive. It was not the wishful fantasy of someone who hadn't yet learned how difficult love can be. It was and remains a completely legitimate understanding of what genuine connection is supposed to feel like. And the fact that it hasn't arrived yet, or hasn't arrived in the form you recognized, has not made it less real. It has simply made the waiting longer than it should have been. This reflection invites you to consider, where specifically did you begin to revise your original understanding of what love was supposed to feel like? And at what point did that revision stop feeling like maturity and start feeling like loss? Because there is a difference, a real and important difference. Maturity says, I understand that love is imperfect, that it requires work, that the cinematic version of it is a construction rather than a reality. Loss says, I have quietly, incrementally stopped believing that certain things are available to me. And those two things can look identical from the outside, can even feel identical in the body for a long time, until something arrives that makes the distinction suddenly, unmistakably clear. Picture a compass that has been recalibrated over time by the accumulated weight of experiences that pulled it off its true bearing. Each experience a small adjustment, each adjustment reasonable in isolation, until the compass is pointing somewhere that feels like north, that has felt like north for long enough that the original direction has become theoretical, something recalled rather than actively known. And then, without warning, without ceremony, in the middle of an ordinary day, true north makes itself felt again, not loudly, not insistently, simply as a pull, a specific, unmistakable pull in a direction that the recalibrated compass wasn't pointing, but that something deeper than the compass has always known was there. Some of you are feeling that pull right now, not understanding it fully, not yet trusting it completely, but feeling it in the specific way that the body registers things it recognizes before the mind has finished constructing its arguments for why recognition at this particular moment is premature or dangerous or likely to produce a familiar kind of disappointment wearing unfamiliar clothes. Uh, this reflection invites you to consider, what does the pull feel like in your body when you allow yourself to feel it without immediately reaching for the apparatus of management and self protection that has become, over time, your first response to anything that feels like the beginning of something real? Because management is not neutral. It is not simply prudent. It costs something. It costs the full, unmediated experience of what is actually present, the warmth that is actually accumulating, the connection that is actually forming, the beginning that is actually beginning in exchange for the protection of not having felt it fully if it turns out to be something other than what it seemed. And the question worth sitting with quietly, without pressure, without needing to resolve it immediately, is whether the protection is still worth the cost. Whether what you're protecting has already been protected enough. Whether the part of you that is being asked right now to feel without managing is ready, not perfectly ready, not safely ready, but ready enough to let something in. Let me tell you what the love you wanted actually looks like in its earliest and most unformed state. Not what it looks like in the middle, when it has settled into familiarity and the extraordinary has become ordinary in the specific way that only things we live inside of can. The beginning, the part before the vocabulary for it exists. The part where it is still more feeling than thought, still more recognition than understanding, still arriving in fragments rather than in the full legible form it will eventually take. In the beginning, the love you wanted feels like ease, where there has always been effort, like a silence that doesn't need to be filled, like the specific, quiet satisfaction of being in a presence that doesn't require you to perform anything, manage anything, or be anything other than exactly what you are at the moment you are it. And it feels like something else too, something that is harder to name, but that may be the most important thing about it. It feels like your own life becoming slightly but unmistakably more legible to you, as though the presence of this person or this beginning or this possibility is somehow clarifying something about you, reflecting something back that the other mirrors in your life have not been showing you, reminding you in the specific way that only genuine recognition can remind a person of who you actually are beneath all the accommodation and adjustment and strategic presentation of a self that has learned over time to lead with what is easiest to receive rather than what is most true. This reflection invites you to consider In what ways has a recent presence um, or a recent shift in an existing dynamic begun to make you more legible to yourself, and what is being reflected back that you had almost stopped expecting to see? Some of you watching this have been in a season of extraordinary interior work, quiet work, the kind that doesn't produce visible results in real time, that doesn't announce itself with the satisfying clarity of progress you can measure and display, the kind that happens in the unglamorous, unwitnessed hours of a life in the private reckonings, in the slow and painful revision of stories that were never quite accurate, but that had become load bearing anyway, in the gradual, costly, entirely necessary process of becoming more honestly yourself. That work has been changing you from the inside in ways that may not yet be fully visible even to you, but that have been altering the fundamental frequency of who you are, what you emit, what you attract, what you are now capable of recognizing and receiving, that the version of you who began that work was not yet equipped for. The love you wanted has always required a version of you that was ready to hold it. Not perfectly ready, not finished, but honest enough and grounded enough and sufficiently recovered from the versions of love that taught you what love wasn't, to be able to recognize the real thing when it arrives, without immediately dismantling it out of the reflexive suspicion that anything this right must be concealing something wrong. That version of you may be the version that is present right now in this reading, in this moment. In this particular unannounced convergence of interior readiness and exterior arrival that tends to happen not when everything is perfectly aligned, but when something in a person has become honest enough to stop standing in the way of what was always quietly intended for them. This reflection invites you to consider, what has the interior work of this past season made available in you that was not available before? And what would it mean to trust that the arrival of something real now is not coincidence, but simply the material world catching up to a shift that has already happened in the deeper register? Uh, the power is yours. It always has been. Not the power to manufacture love or to force a beginning into being something it isn't yet ready to be, but the power to remain genuinely, honestly, without the armor that has been so useful and is now perhaps slightly more than necessary open, present, available to the warmth that is already accumulating in the unhurried, gentle, entirely serious way that the love you actually wanted has always moved, not fast, not dramatically, but with a consistency and a quality of attention and a specific rightness that has no adequate explanation except the one your gut has already been quietly, persistently offering you. You're about to start a relationship, and this is the love you wanted, not eventually. Now, in the warmth that is already present, in the pull that is already being felt, in the beginning that is already quietly and without announcement underway. In the specific moment when the cold that has been with you for so long finally, without drama, without ceremony, simply lifts. Trust yourself with this. The version of you that recognizes what is real, that has always known the difference between what almost fits and what actually does, has not forgotten how to know. It has simply been waiting with the rest of you for something worth knowing. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. What does the love you actually wanted feel like, not look like, but feel like in the most specific and unguarded terms you can find for it? And what is the one thing that would need to be present in the earliest days of something new for the part of you that has been protecting itself to finally, carefully begin to rest? Drop it below. I read every single word, and this space holds all of it without condition. See you in the next one, and listen. The love that fits doesn't ask you to be more or less or different. It simply asks you to be present. And presence, after everything, may be the most extraordinary thing you have left to offer. Take care.